This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Welcome back, everybody. It is time once again to look at some work submitted by viewers like you, and I want to start this with a pretty high bar today. Every now and then, somebody will send me something that really establishes a new standard of whatever's been sent before, and we're going to start with one of those books today. I absolutely love this. So this is a book called Shanti, which comes to us from a photographer by the name of Arun Paitel. So Shanti is a series of landscape images that are entirely in black and white, and this is almost not fair to even put in these videos because this is high production stuff, and this book probably cost a lot of money to do. It's very, very well done. All the images, as I mentioned, are black and white. They are all warm tone. You never see images on facing pages, so it's got a very classical layout with it. One of the things that I love about Arun's work is that he is not only working in black and white, but he is playing with dimension using a technique that I really love, where you're basically limiting your dynamic range. So when you consider classic prints, and when you consider things like, let's say, platinum palladium or something like that, you know, you've got cameras today that now have like up to 15, 16 stops of light at their base ISO. Well, that's digital camera. But when we get into printing processes, you're down to, with paper, probably about 8 stops-ish. And using that to your advantage, and this is one of the things that I love about Arun's work in here. And I first saw this technique a couple years ago when I discovered a book on black and white printing by a gentleman named John Blakemore, who's an incredible British photographer. And, you know, when you think about Ansel Adams and the zone system, the whole idea of having 10 zones to work with of black and white, zone 1 would be pure black, zone 10 would be pure white, that you're dealing with those steps. And to come up with a balanced photograph in the end is something where you want an even number of tones from whites to darks. You don't lose detail in any of the light areas or the dark areas, and everything is very evened out. And while that worked great for the stuff that Ansel was doing, and he did brilliant work with that, Blakemore would use techniques where, let's say, you don't necessarily have to have the lower zones of like 1 through 3. Everything can be very high key. Or you could do the opposite, where everything is very low key. And what I love is that Arun takes that even a step further, and he's creating dimension and depth and layering, not by depth of field so much, but with actually using different tones and tonalities within that. So you end up with kind of these dynamic range palettes that are fairly limited, but it's got a beautiful effect as a result of that. I absolutely love this work. I think it is so cool. The other thing that I love is Arun's sense of composition. It's very Zen-like, it's very simple, it's very minimal, it's very clean, and sometimes he puts little figures in the image that just completely make the image, even though the figures may be taking up 1/100th of the image vocabulary in there. And it's really well done. This is very mature work. It's very well printed. Arun, you should be very proud of this book. This is absolutely fabulous. This is, I'm going to go ahead and say it, I kind of wish that I had made this. It's that good. It is so cool. So I will put a link to Arun's work and everybody else's in the show description below if you're interested in getting a copy of this. I highly recommend it. This book is just fabulous. The cloth cover, everything's bound really well. This is not a low production budget book. It is first class. And Arun, thank you for sharing, because it is first class, even the content of the images. So well done, my man. So another thing that I'll say is that here at The Art of Photography, we are all about contrasts, if you know what I mean. And so we're going to contrast a very high production book with a lower production book that I think has an equal impact. It's also extremely well done. It's just at the other end of the spectrum. This zine is handmade. This is called La Habana. This comes to us from Lyle James, who is a very talented photographer who's also a veteran of mail time. I've featured him before. He includes a note which reads, "Howdy Ted, quick note to say that what you hold in your hands is the sister zine to one I made in 2015 on the Hungarian capital of Budapest. You were kind enough to showcase it in a mailbag episode in 2018. The intention with this new edition was to find a location linked to Budapest, albeit a tenuous link, but also different enough to make it distinct. Therefore, I chose the Cuban capital of Havana. Both had connections with the USSR and have a sense of faded grandeur about them. Also, Havana has matched the old and battered camera which I had with me, despite its age still functioned. Sadly, Fujifilm have not produced any of the film packs for quite some time. I had just 3 to spare for this particular trip, and now the camera has become a curiosity piece, but I was happy to give it a decent send-off, and certainly attracted a lot of attention from fellow tourists and locals. I can recommend a trip to Cuba. There were plenty of American tourists, and they had no issues coming and going. Lyle, this is fantastic. I love the lo-fi impact of everything, the pictures, the camera that you used. By the way, he was using a Fujifilm FP3000, which sort sort of like a Polaroid thing, and it's really difficult to get stuff for anymore. But anyway, it matches up with the handmade nature of this. I love that it's hand-stitched. I don't know if you guys can see the stitching on the binding there. This is really well done. And curiously enough, it's the same thing I was saying about a runes book, is that when you go into paper from the digital world, that you're dealing with a very limited dynamic range. And I think that the look that this camera gives just works so perfectly in the fact that this is just a handmade zine, and it's really cool. It's really well done. And this actually has the spirit of a zine. I love the abstraction that you get on a lot of these shots where things dance on the edge of abstraction. It takes me a minute to realize I'm looking at the dashboard of a car out the window. It's really cool, light leaks and all. So very well done. La Habana, I will put a link up to Lyle's work in the show description. So, and as mentioned, he's a veteran, so thanks for sharing once again, Lyle. Really appreciate it. All right, continuing on with our bar set high today, we have Images from Nature Volume 2, as well as a beautiful color book, which I'm going to get to in just a second. But real quick, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor today, who are the awesome folks over at Squarespace. How easy is it to build an amazing website in a matter of minutes? Squarespace has you covered. It's dead simple. Head over to Squarespace, hit get started. You can start by using Squarespace Blueprint AI and SEO tools, which will give you an impressive website in no time. Something unique because, you're not like other websites. Give your site a name. Next, you can build your homepage. We'll start with a few preset layouts just to get us going. Want to sell products like prints, books, maybe you make a zine? Well, you can feature those on your homepage. Create a few more sections if you want. Let's also give it a color palette. There's a whole bunch to choose from. Just get us started. We can change this all later. Next, let's select the typography choices. Welcome to your website. Everything is set up and it's all ready for you to customize. Squarespace is built on Fluid Engine, the next generation of website design. Select Edit, and Fluid Engine allows you to drag, place, and resize any element on the page. You can snap these to a grid, you can make them float on top of one another, you can freeform however you like. You can even preview and adjust how the site looks on either desktop or mobile. The layouts are independent. Of course, you'll want a portfolio for your work. Creating an image gallery is as easy as dropping a folder of images on your web browser. Once uploaded, you can drag to resort, customize the look, and Squarespace writes all of the code for you. Everything just works and it looks fabulous. Want to sell your own prints, books, or zines? Flexible payments allow you to make the checkout process absolutely seamless when you sell products or services. You can accept credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, and in eligible countries, you can offer customers the option to buy now and pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay. You should try Squarespace for yourself. It's absolutely free, no credit card required. Just go to squarespace.com/AOP, sign up for that free trial. If you decide Squarespace is right for you, I can save you an additional 10% on your order by using offer code AOP on checkout. That's right, the code is AOP. So stop procrastinating, go build your website today. And I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. All right, so next up, we're going to look at images from nature. This comes to us from a photographer by the name of Andrew Hertel. Andrew includes a note which reads, "Hi Ted, a few years ago, after repeatedly hearing I have no more wall space while selling prints at art shows, I decided I needed an additional way for individuals to experience my work. That's when I created my first book, reflecting on the images that I had captured that year. The process of creating the book proved to be one of the most challenging yet rewarding endeavors that I've ever undertaken. I had underestimated the difficulty of sequencing the images. Fortunately, the book was met with great success, prompting me to make an annual project." While the term zine is often used interchangeably with smaller photo books, I prefer to just refer this to a book, is for no other reason than it simply feels right to me. Laying out and sequencing a book of images with few parameters created with any specific time frame and focused on nature presented a considerable challenge. I had to diligently identify common themes and similarities with the images to establish a cohesive flow throughout the pages, thereby telling a compelling story for the viewer. Through this process, I have gained valuable insights into my art and myself as an artist. I am grateful for having made this annual challenge. Once again, thank you for the endless inspiration. It is truly appreciated. I sincerely hope you enjoy the book and the images contained within. All right, so Andrew, you did an excellent job on here. I think one thing that you've alluded to in here, which I also agree is very difficult, is most of your work is horizontal, and a lot of times getting these to work as spreads and communicate with one another is difficult just because of the layout and the size and the shape and so on and so forth. But I think you've done a really good job. I like what you've done, especially when you get into abstraction versus reality. I love your style of work. I like the high contrast look. It's very different than the other landscape stuff that we've looked at. Your deep blacks and rich whites, I think that it really works well. And then you do these kind of atmospheric things sometimes that I really like too. So one thing that I want to say about your layout here, and I think one thing you can, well, first of all, let me start with this. One thing I love that you're doing is that you've made this an annual tradition. So every year you're going to do a book. And one thing that I would start to think about is how does what you've learned from your layouts previously, how does that play in when you're getting images for the next one? That's one thing that might help you. And another thing that I would actually recommend with something like this is a lot of times you have images that have such a striking impact, especially like this mountain with those deep, rich blacks, or even this cliff here. So two things that I want to point out that might help you with future layouts is, first of all, I kind of want to see your work breathe a little bit. I want to see it a little bit smaller on the page. Let your borders define the composition. Your work is good enough. You're not going to lose any detail. It's still going to look great. The other thing that I question, and I say this with a lot of books, are the titles at the bottom. Are they important? And they may be to you important as the photographer because they're significant of the place in which you went to go shoot. But I think for me, and I'm just going to tell you this as a first-time viewer of this, is that I'm not sure that you need them. I think a better way is to do an appendix. That way, if anybody actually is curious as to what images on page 23, let's say, I'd rather have page numbers that are super small and then an appendix in the back where I can look at the titles. And, you know, because you've got bold type and you don't have a whole lot of border to work with here. So it starts, it's not terrible. I've seen worse examples, but it does distract from the images just a little bit. Those are the only comments that I would make on this. Just let your work breathe a little bit. It's okay to do sometimes. Another technique that I've talked about a lot with the zine workshops that I've done, and if you guys are curious, we don't have any planned at the moment, but we are going to put some more in for the rest of the year. So I'll put a link below in the show description if you want to get on the mailing list to be alerted to when those come up. But one of the things that we talk about in those zine workshops is the whole idea of having facing pages as a spread versus having a single image with a blank page on the other side. One of the ideas that comes up with this is it becomes more chapter-like. If I have a blank page on the left, let's say that we just have this image here, this page is white, it looks like the beginning of a new section or a new chapter. If you have it vice versa, it feels like it may be the end. This is one technique out of many, but it's something that you can start to think about when you put your work into chapters, let's say. So anyway, just a couple small suggestions. I love the project. I love the fact that you've committed to doing this every year. I think you're going to grow a lot as a photographer, and you're going to get really good as the years go by, and I think you've already seen that with your first couple editions here, minus the COVID subtraction that was in there. But anyway, really nice work. I really enjoy looking at this, and I can't wait to see where you're going to take this in the future. So anyway, awesome work, man. I'm going to link it up in the show description below, so thank you for sharing. All right, so after a ton of monochrome work, we're going to do some color now. This is a beautiful little book that comes to us from, if I'm saying your name right, Scott Boety. Scott is a very talented color photographer from Nebraska. He also includes a note which reads, "Hi, Ted. I've always been impressed with the quality of the works viewers submit and you show on Mailtime episodes. That's largely what inspired me to collect my favorite images from a year to make a zine to send out like a large Christmas card to friends and family. I thought it would be cool one day to make one good enough, quote unquote, to submit, but I found it difficult to imagine my work meeting that bar. I imagine I'm not alone in this amongst your viewers, but as you say, never apologize for a photo. So in that spirit is enclosed the book that I made last year to send friends and family to share a collection of my favorite images that I've taken in the 10 years since I first seriously started photography as a hobby. I've mostly organized it from worst to best within sections and similarly within the order of the sections, at least in my opinion. I made some adjustments to the order to make some pairings more interesting, but honestly, I placed more emphasis on including my favorites than creating perfect pairings or flow. Hope you enjoy, Scott." All right, so Scott, first of all, I want to say this is a beautiful book. I really love your color sense. You do a lot of sunsets, things like that, the beautiful oranges, reds. You have a really good eye for light and timing with these things, and I think a lot of the work in here is very nice. I want to see where you go with this. I love the bold colors. The only comments that I would make on here, and I want to address something in your letter also, but is watch your saturation levels just a little bit. There are a couple images in here where they're a little too saturated and the printer's having issues with it. But remember, guys, things look a little bit different on a computer screen and a mobile device than they're going to replicate on paper. Having said that, you did a really nice job, but just watch it in places. The other thing I would say, much like the last book that I showed, is that first of all, I want want to see your work breathe just a little more. And I know that you're still struggling with some layout issues, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're going to learn a lot when you see the finished product, and you're going to know what you're really happy with, and you're going to know what you want to change for next time. So that's one thing I would say. Second of all, I'm going to hammer on this again. Every image is labeled. I'm not really sure if we need that information in your case specifically because you have everything by chapter. And so I know I'm going into a chapter, and if I want to see the images and where they actually are location-wise, an appendix in the back would be really good. I do want to address something that you said in your note. And yes, we do say here at The Art of Photography, never apologize for a photograph. And I also want to say never feel guilty or that the bar is too high to submit work. And the reason I say that, I had a music teacher years and years ago. I do not have a formal education in photography, but I do in music. I had a really good music teacher that used to say, you know, everybody is on some kind of continuum or journey. It's really difficult to say, well, this musician's way better than this guy. That doesn't really mean anything. What the person's trying to say is this musician is just further along their journey than the person before. And I like that so much better because it's one of the reasons that I love teaching. I learn from people who are not as experienced as I am. I learn from people who are more experienced as I am. I hope that people learn from me in the same way. And I think that's the kind of spirit that we need more of in the world of photography. It's not about being better than somebody or being good enough for something. It's about learning. It's about the process. And it's about having something to say. And I think your work, you clearly have something that you want to say, that you want to communicate. From a technical perspective, you're making really good photographs. You're challenging yourself to do things that technically are very difficult. Milky Way shots, moon shots, sunset shots. I think these are really cool, especially your sense of lighting, your sense of timing. And what I would say is just do more of it. Get ready to do another book next year and let that inform you of the kinds of work that you want to start seeing yourself do. Go through and decide what you like about it, and then go and find things that maybe you can improve on. And I think maybe if you're really shrewd, go in and look for thematic things that you can build on. That's something that's really important. Just like, oh, I did this here, and that'd be something to like do more photographs with or challenge myself with, or maybe it's just a piece of a photograph, or it's something that you feel like needs to be in one of those photographs. I think those are the kinds of things that are going to push us along. So I wanted to say that because I think your work is good. I think it definitely is good enough. Everybody can learn from everybody, and I think that's a better attitude to have. So I really appreciate you being brave enough to get this done and share it. I hope it was a good experience for you, and I will link up everybody in the show description below if you guys want to learn more. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, later.